What's up, and welcome back to another episode of the Youth Pastors Podcast. My name is John Rush, and I'm joined by my youth pastor and the man who taught me so much of what I know about youth ministry and more, Garrett Thor Alcides.
Well, thanks, John. I feel like that is probably not fully accurate anymore because now I feel like the roles reversed and now I just get to watch and learn. So, yeah, man, I love this. I love that this gets to happen, and I love our dynamic, and I love the other youth pastors joining our side as we are building this thing. So, it's pretty exciting. Do
Absolutely.
you want to? Yeah, man. Do you actually want to give a little snippet about the youth pastors and kind of what's being built a little bit?
No, I'm just
All right,
kidding.
deal. That's good to hear.
Um, yeah, if you guys are watching this, you may this may already be evident through our sites and socials. But if you're one of just the underground fans that's been following as we've just kind of been tiptoeing our way through this whole project, Garrett and I have brought in um, some friends, some people that are actively in youth ministry positions, and are doing it in a unique way or a unique place. And so we want this to have a plethora of experience, as Garrett and I are more helping with the capital C church, capital K kingdom, meaning we work with a plurality of different churches. We want to make sure that this content's represented by people with boots on the ground. So we got some friends that we'll introduce you guys to real soon, if not already.
Yeah, I love it. I'm gonna laugh if any of them just pop up on this call, uh, dude, all right. So I keep having these thoughts, and I feel like I just need to flush out this conversation, and so maybe you can help me do that. But the reality is, I feel like there's this old saying, which is knowledge is power, and we've also lived life to enough people that there's an old saying as well, going, "Can you hold the power?" And can you keep a secret? Can you guard this information? And this gets really weird inside of the ministry world, in my opinion, because knowledge kind of is power. When you have the information, people leverage that information for influence or authority. And it's just a really weird power dynamic that kind of becomes really manipulative. And so there all of a sudden becomes these lines of like secrecy. Oh, well, these people aren't technically top leaders in our organization. We can't tell them this information. Right? Why? Like, why do we keep things a secret, especially inside the church? Um, that's an organization that should be really governed by the body. So it's just interesting, right? So I'd love to talk through maybe secrecy, but then also how that stuff can impact, everyday youth pastors or other pastors that are leading people. So whether it dips into flattery and manipulation, emotional intensity, and how some of those times those things aren't guarded, and so we can unpack that. Yeah,
So power dynamics in ministry, pastoral power dynamics. Is that a good way of framing
yeah,
it?
man. And I'm down to I'm just gonna throw it out here early. But there are power dynamics in information. There are power dynamics in relationships, and I could name half a dozen pastoral couples that you or I have worked with that at one point in time the spouses were of legal age and illegal age, and once this legal barrier got crossed, marriage happened. And it's, to me, is a weird dynamic, but things aren't talked about. And I think if that were to happen in today's culture, if your youth pastor is like got an eye on a 17, 16, 15-year-old girl going one day, we would just call that grooming. It's uncomfortable to say if you're maybe one of those people that are like, but I married my youth kid. That's messed up.
That's your official stance?
That's my official stance, I think. Yeah.
So you think there should be a rule in place where it's like if this person was ever your youth kid, you shouldn't marry them. Is that
I do think that is my stance because of the vantage point that you have created in their life, given to you by a platform or a stage. You're placed into this person's life out of a place of trust, and you're given respect, you're given authority over this person to guide them. And when you guide them, to your personal side and embrace, I don't see how that's not incredibly manipulative, even if it's over the course of a time.
I know one I don't I know one instance where, um, as something like this developed years after the person was no longer a youth student, the senior pastor approached the family first to just be like, "Hey, if you feel weird about my youth pastor pursuing your daughter, you say the word and, like, you know, it's over. We just wanna honor you and respect you," and did it in a familial sense. What do you think about that?
Um, I would be okay with that. Not that it matters if I'm okay with it or not, but I think I would be more inclined to be okay with that if there is a season of time where this person is not underneath the care of these people. Like if this person goes off to college and comes back 2, 3,
Yeah.
4 years later, and they've had time to experience the world or life and other views and leadership and just perspective versus going constantly following your leadership, and this is where it has led me. I think at some point that's just worth the conversation that even though maybe that's working out still today, maybe it's been 5, 10, 15 years later and their marriage is healthy and they have kids and they have a family. Great. Was it ever a conversation though that it got there through the lens of being manipulated, even a little bit, manipulated in your favor? And I'm someone who doesn't say all manipulation is bad, but when it's just for your gain, I think it is needs to be evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are the types of things that seem ridiculous or superfluous or even uncomfortable to talk about, but I think that they're important things to talk about, and I think I think churches either get too lost in systems that they don't actually enforce, or everything is just a pastoral conversation, and there's no standardized way or approach or accountability or healthy way of, like, going about it, and so I think you need both, and so I think these are good conversations that honestly, in the heat of ministry, can honestly just get swept under the rug. Well, let's talk not about, maritally or,
Yeah.
you know.
Dude, let's talk about memes, all right? So, just as the amount of communication that youth pastors do, and sometimes it's sending mass text messages, sometimes it's just filtering out when you get a DM from a student. Where do you feel like some guidelines are, even if it's it doesn't matter. Does it matter if it's a boy or girl DMing you? How are you handling DMs, and what do you do with things like memes when they're like, "Oh, I'm just sending my youth pastor this thing because it's funny." But now this is a one-on-one private conversation, and I'm not saying that's bad. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you navigate that as the youth pastor? Go, I want to make sure that this is still all within the confines of boundaries and done right. That when anybody else sees this, it's totally above reproach.
I mean, this might sound extreme, but I'm like, I just don't think you should be friends with anyone of the opposite sex to the same degree that you are with that of the same gender. Or when you're married, or when you're considering leadership and power dynamics. Like I just don't think there's a lot of good reasons to be privately messaging anyone. That's like if I'm a guy, you know.
So if a female student DMs you, do you respond or how do you navigate it?
Normally, I respond in a really, honestly, in a way that probably, now that I think about it, probably, probably seems rude in knowing how, like, Gen Z picks apart, digital, you and I wouldn't think it's rude, but I'll be like, "Ha ha," like, and what normally happens is because of that, like, digital social etiquette, I think I shut down a lot of conversations 'cause I just, like, if I do respond, it's something very, if they keep responding, I'll bring in someone necessary, you know, a leader, a parent, to help have a conversation or just make them aware. I wouldn't say that I go out of my way to go find who that student is and be like, hey, you need to stop. Because then I think sometimes you are potentially creating something that is innocent and making it weird, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's trauma.
Yeah.
I think it's more just about like an example would be like I speak at I speak at the same place often. I've been going there for like 10 years. And um and uh I'm there all the time. And so like, similar to how when I've been on staff at churches, if there's a girl, that is just really interested in me with 95%, actually, like, I can't even think of a time where it's been anything other than I think this girl looks up to me, or maybe there's like a father wound thing. I don't know. Like, I try not to even overanalyze it. I just know that if they're trying to pursue a more intimate relationship with me, um, intimate's even the weird word there. I just mean, like, if you're trying to be my friend, I will tell one of the older women leaders and just be like, "Hey, such and such, let's make up a name." Like,
Yeah.
you know, Esther. Hey, Esther's just been DMing me a lot. Just so you know, I'm gonna stop responding. Maybe you can just follow up with her about it. And most of the time that just clears it up because it's like an older woman saying to a younger girl, "Hey, just so you know, like, it's kind of not a thing you should be like DMing like an older man who's married, like, um,
But I think what you said is important, right? To have a good handoff, because the goal is to make sure that person's taken care of, especially if they're looking for guidance or looking for a mentor, any of those things. But I think it's whether there's a power dynamic or not, and when you have a love interest in your life and you're married, or you're not, you just have love interest. It's like, shoot, even if you're single and you're not looking to partner with this person, I feel like there's something to be said that a relationship done right should build respect. A relationship done with flattery leads to feelings and emotions.
yeah, and I think flattery, like, let's define it. It's meeting an emotional need. And I just think that God designed us to have our emotional needs met through opposite gendered people who are our family. So like you and I both have sisters. I think there's a part of God's design in that, Like we have moms, Um we used to have grandmas.
Mm.
Not to be morbid. Um and then, we have wives and guess what? We have daughters. And it's like the reality is outside of especially my wife, but let alone the other girls, women in my family, what else do I really need? And I think that that's just a safe way of living because I think flattery turns to, emotional need meeting, which I think that's what opens the door. Everyone acts like maybe it was, but like with the advent of corn, PORN, you know, I don't think people's initial stumblings are through um lust. I think because if people are really struggling with lust, they're probably very involved in corn, And so I actually think I think a lot of people tell themselves, "Well, I'm good. I don't want to sleep with this girl. I don't want to." No, 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 no. When she walks in the room, does something happen here? When he walks in the room, is there something going on here with the car? That's how all modern affairs start. That's how it all begins. And I think if we're all honest, there are real elements to ministry that can create that environment that if we don't nip it in the bud and create some strong rules, it can turn into something weird.
Yeah, and in any power dynamic, right? So especially youth pastor, let's say, because that's our topic here. Flattery is very common from your audience, from students, from other parents, from leaders, all of those things. And hey, you did so great tonight. Great compliment, but it's flattery. Like we can go down the list of all of those things and what you do with those when they come, how you process them, what needs you let them meet as an individual. All of that really does matter because it kind of shapes you. And if you've ever been in a season or a moment where you're like, I'm not sure how I felt tonight, I'm going to ask so and so because I know they're going to flatter me. They're going to tell me I crushed it. They're going to tell me I did great. They're going to tell me what I want to hear. And we all know that game. I'm not sure we are honest with ourselves with it, but it's a dangerous one to play when you're just filling your own needs with the people around you that you can cherry pick the compliments you want.
No, and I think that's exactly it's you know, I think something that's like a very normal part of modern life, which I think is a part of all life, but it's like, what's your thing? Like, what's the thing you take a hit of? Is it coffee? Is it ice cream? Is it video games? Is it Netflix? Is it working out? Is it a pizza? Is it right? Not all of it. It's not all bad, right? Like I think God designed creation to alleviate stress, to increase pleasure and joy, and you know. But I think what we need to be watching out for is like what are coping mechanisms, or what are things that you're taking a hit of that is just not in line with God's design. And I think power dynamics are in ministry can be a very real thing. I think on the I want to move into like authoritarian authoritarian element of this in a second, but the last thing or not the last thing maybe, but one thing I'll say is like what's weird is like a lot of women maybe listening to this, um it would my the same women that would want to protect young girls, the same women that would want to champion equitable relationships between men and women would also say, "Oh, it's weird you can't be friends with girls." And I'm like, I don't know if you can have it both ways. And I, I'm not. I hope I've said this in a way that's not even trying to paint it like because there's a part of this conversation which I personally think is a minute part. I just heard Watts in the your dog. He's scratching himself. No,
Oh, it was my bearded dragon actually. He's in the
I
bathroom.
heard you're a lizard. That's crazy.
He,
Uh,
there's a cricket stuff in the film. Yeah, who cares? All right, go on.
um, I think I just think it's interesting that they would say like, oh, that's weird. I'm not saying because a lot of where this conversation starts is like the way that people dress. I'm like, we're not even talking about that right now. Um, because I honestly think that's a moot point if you're doing this well. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Yeah,
a moot point outside of this. Like I'm saying regardless of how someone dresses, you should have such relational boundaries set up that you're nowhere near like all of a sudden like doing something weird, you know?
yeah, and just to be clear, like if there's plenty of girls like throughout our history that I will still have contact with. The difference is with a proper boundary. My boundary isn't block, don't respond. What like my difference is going, oh my gosh, you text me a life update. I'm gonna respond and say, this is amazing, so cool, love to see it. Whatever, however I want to respond, I'm gonna respond. The difference is I get to tell my wife, hey, I talked to so and so today. Guess what? Blah, 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 blah. She's now in the loop. She's part of it. I didn't add her into the conversation to make it weird. I like,
Yeah.
but also, does your speaking of dog, does your loved one or your accountability or one of those things have free reign to pick up your phone and look at anything, look at any DM, look at any text message? Like, what's vulnerability look like?
It's
Because
such
the
a good
problem is,
that's such a good test. Like I feel like that should be like actually something that people teach. Like I can hand my phone to anybody.
yeah.
And sometimes I think about how liberating that feels. That like my kids will just pick up my daughter could start scrolling through my camera roll. I'm not worried about anything
Or your
except
Safari browser tabs.
my Safari browser tabs. And that's not like because I'm awesome. That's because we work at this. Like I talk to my wife, about these things. I even just preached at a church on Sunday talking about a specific moment where I was at an event and this young woman was like hitting me with the eyes. And I was like, bruh, like I I FaceTime my wife that night and be like, yo, this girl who I think, is pretty was like really looking at me. I'm just letting you know so that we can pray together. You can talk this out. I want to let you know here are the two dudes in that are with me here that I've told about this. And I just think when you confess sin or is it sin, is it not? I don't know. Jesus said if you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you've committed adultery. So is it sin? Is it not? It's probably just better if we just have a higher standard of what sin is versus like try to tell ourselves it's not. So let's, yeah, whatever. It loses its power. When you say it
Yeah.
to somebody, it loses power. I think I still text you certain things like, accountability stuff and like, so I just think it's like, and I think what you said about involving your wife is right. Or if you're a woman, a spouse, or your husband, um, I'm not, this is also cool. There's not a single female I'm close with that my wife is not close with. Or like I'm not closer to a female than my wife is close to them. And the closeness that someone is to my wife, the more I might lean into that relationship. So an example would be like Rachel, not your wife, Rachel Parsons, who, spoiler alert, is a part of this youth pastors thing. Um, she was one of my volunteers. Then she became my like right hand volunteer, and then we hired her at my last local church assignment. She's important to us. The part that gave me so much confidence in the relationship is my wife was friends with her for, excuse me, my wife was friends with her for a year before I ever knew her. So much of the confidence I had entering into that relationship to say this is someone who's close to me, I can work closely with them, is because my wife had already they had their own rapport. But even with that, I might text Rachel more than I text other people. But one, and she and I have even like said this, like there's just, I just think it's just, you should just talk about some of this stuff sometimes. It's like, it's not the same as one of my guy friends. And then also like, it's not like she and I are just always going away to have like one-on-ones, like in private places or even, like coffee shops. Like honestly, when you establish this as the way of living your life, it's not that weird. It's like, I also feel like it's where like sober people, they just feel weird being sober. There's this social pressure, But I'm like, the moment you just tell yourself, I'm gonna conduct my way around the opposite sex a certain way, it's just not that weird. You just don't even think, this is the most I
Because
thought about it in a
you
long
have
time.
more peace. You have more peace because you're not doing the mental gymnastics to convince yourself that you're not doing something wrong. And whether it's wrong or not, that's up to every individual to decide because they're your boundaries and you're the one knows what lines you're close to. But if you're having to figure out, "Ooh, should I tell my wife? Should I not tell my wife? Ooh, am I getting too close to this person? Ooh, I'm struggling with these thoughts. Ooh, I have this crush, I'm hiding it." While trying to act normal, while trying to lead other people, while trying to be professional, like, that becomes exhausting. Like, that's where you begin to break down layer after layer versus just living, like, authentic, transparent, and vulnerable. You can do all of those things without it being weird if you're just honest with yourself and then honest with the people around you. And
And
I
that
think that is
and that's
super
why and that's why I think rooting this principle less about what you avoid and more about what you embrace. So
mm,
it's weird if that's why I think the Billy Graham rule sometimes gives people the heebie-jeebies because it is it because it kind of assumes weirdness. It's kind of almost like, yeah, I can't be in an elevator alone with someone of the opposite sex. And you're like, that might be like just smart, right? Like Shannon Sharp, who's not a Christian at all, like just very public figure. Like a lot of male celebrities ascribe to the Billy Graham rule, which is hilarious that people mock it because they're like, I just don't want to like, lose everything because someone said, because if I'm in,
right, right.
but I think a lot of these conversations get talked about only in, again, what we avoid versus what we embrace. I have just realized God, through his design, through my family, has given me all the female close relationships that I need, you know? And then on top of that, there's been a couple over the years that are friends that become family. And that's all I need, Like, I mean, your sister, like our story, I always say it, like your sister Megan is who led me to Jesus. I responded to an altar call. She was a part of my initial conversation and then, or conversion and maintained always as a steady figure in my life, but you're the one that discipled me. There's no way I don't think she could have gotten that close to me to disciple me the way that you discipled me. And I think that's okay, like I just think that's okay. And like even just again, what yours embrace. If I really need to know, like, again, it's weird saying it this way, but like, if I really need non-familial female affirmation, I just, I have a few like God just will provide some of that. Like text Megan, which is Garrett's sister. Megan, do you think I'm Do you think I'm a good guy? Do you think I'm a good preacher? And she'd say, yeah, I love you. But like, you know what? I've also never done that because I don't need it like that. So I think that's the thing is like, whenever there's an unhealthy power dynamic between the opposite sex, whether it's a minor or a fellow adult, I really think it all stems, Garrett, from something flawed in God's initial design. There's something going on in your marriage, something going on in your sex life. There's something going on. There's just something missing that you're trying to fill a void that you should be getting from God or what God has designed for you already. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So I think that I think the Billy Graham rule 2.0 is not talking about what we need to avoid or trying to treat like women like they're some like landmine or that they should feel dirty or weird. I think it's just about being wise and smart and embracing the way that God has designed us. Like God, you want close female relationships? Have a family, be a part of a family, like, or, like, or be so tight knit with certain people in your church, embracing your spouse that some of these relationships, become like family. This also, though, it also highlights the need for me of just a good reminder, even as stuff comes out in the news, um, of why it's so wise and why we need women on our pastoral leadership teams. We need women in leadership for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons is because whenever you see a weird power dynamic between male pastors and female subordinates, I very often you see that there are not any women empowered to notice that, spot that, call that out, see that. And so I think that's another reason why just even again, doing ministry with Rachel, and you and I have always done ministry with strong female teammates. One of the things that, like, I, a lot of times Rachel's even told me this, like, any weirdness, she sees it as a woman and like kills it before it's even a thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's stuff I don't even know might have been brewing where like a girl had, like a teenage girl had a crush on me or just liked how I preached or something that Rachel would just go up to, like, she just saw it and she never even told me because sometimes telling is like almost weirder, So
Yeah.
I think it's
So no,
another so I hope I'm not speaking out of both sides of my mouth where I'm saying I'm not saying stay away from women, stay away from the opposite gender. I'm saying have your house in order, have them, in the right
yeah.
relationships.
It's so interesting. Not that I want to talk about this at all, but I always find it so interesting because I believe in the power of purity, but also the way purity culture was done in large churches throughout the 90s and early 2000s, those things was also so damaging to a lot of young girls. And I know a lot of strong female leaders who led through the lens of like, guys are idiots, girls cover up. And the girls are like, what? Why do I have to live my life because that dude can't control himself? And that's an ongoing conversation forever. My point is, yes, do your best to remain pure, obviously. But if the focus is on like transparency and honesty and boundaries and like how each person is living their life in a vulnerable opposition to their own accountability and to their own dynamics, most of that struggle gets taken care of. And it's no longer about shaming this person or making this person dress a certain way or not allowing these people because they dress a certain way, because people should be putting themselves in check. And if we haven't built that culture into our own ministries, then that's kind of an issue.
Yeah,
All right, I know you want.
well, I think I know you're looking at the clock. I think we should just do power dynamics part 2. I think we should just finish this topic because I think this is good, and then I think we should give um the other side of power dynamics a whole conversation about how to not abuse power, how to not get emotional gratification from pulverizing people. Because I like what you just said, and I think it warrants a further conversation. I feel like I'm ready to say, I feel like I'm ready to boldly say that purity culture in terms of how young girls dress should have nothing to do with how it affects men. Because as I'm training my son, William, as you're training your son, Tristan, who you've got some years on me with that. They're in different stages of life and development. As I'm discipling guys like Hector, as you and I are in guys' lives, I need to teach them that sin is crouching at the door
Yeah.
and that they are not going to live in church, and that there is always an enemy prowling. There's always going to be plenty of flesh to look at. So I need to just train them to be ready to avoid those situations anyway. Why leverage any ounce of shame or weirdness on a young girl or a woman for how they dress and how it's going to affect men? I think how, how a woman or a young girl dresses should all be about how they are representing themselves. Like, how are you doing? Like, have you ever met someone who's like dressing in a lewd, salacious way that is just like a super stable human being? That's just like just loving life, not on meds, not like describe someone like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I think it's more about
Those
taking
comments are gonna go awesome.
take shame out of the equation. And when I'm teaching my girls with the help of my wife and my family and God's design to say, how should you dress? It should be all about how they're reflecting their best selves and the relationship with themselves and God and the world around them, not don't dress that way because you're going to have someone fall into temptation. No, they don't need that pressure. They don't need that shame. The question should
Yeah.
be, how are you doing?
Yeah, and I feel the same way about the body positivity movement that's happened in the past, 5, 10 years. These last 5 years specifically have been crazy because body positivity turned into being okay with who I am to being okay with the worst version of myself. The most unhealthy version of myself should be acceptable. Any version of me should be acceptable. And it's not for me to say you're acceptable or not. It's my job to look at my kids and help them understand the best version of who they can be. And if they choose to become that, guide them that way. And it's really wild to see. Here's an interesting stat that I did see this last week that I was going to throw at you, and we can move this stat into the next conversation if you want. But it was an interesting thought. I almost said it a minute ago when you were talking about the necessity of having strong women on your teams, right? Because a a progressive church, right? So essentially your mega churches statistically all lean 70-30 female to male.
So not theologically progressive necessarily, right? Because some will
Yeah,
hear that as
progressive's not right.
theological.
I'm Pentecostal. How's that? Not progressive. Sorry. Um,
Well, that's a
yeah.
do we mean large churches, or what did the
Yeah.
stat say?
Yes. Yes. Large churches.
Large churches.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
I think
mega
that's a
churches.
yeah, mega churches. Okay, mega churches.
The most mega churches are Pentecostal, I think. Right.
Yeah.
That carry the word mega. Um, but it's crazy because they're male led, but 70-30 female to male congregation.
Yeah, I think that's because a lot of guys just wanna create some weird social harem, and instead of developing, fellow men, they would rather just, create a yes woman culture around them.
It's just like,
I
what the
mean,
heck?
that's my,
I'm
I'm 32 with an energy drink take, but I'm just like, "Dog, you're such a good leader, you're such a expert, you've gone to school for this, and, you got, one dude around who you don't even think could replace you? Like, what are we doing here? And you're speaking at conferences? Like, what?"
and yet trying to figure out how to reach dads. But that's like the target. Like I just can't figure out the weird. It's like spaghetti on a wall, hoping to find what sticks and calling it a strategy. And it's like, what are we doing as the American church? It's like it's
I I
very
think
weird.
that's interesting, and I don't think, again, just like the purity culture thing, I don't want women to take any of the heat off of that. I don't mean to make any statements like there's something wrong with them for being there. To me, and this is anecdotal, I just think that I just think that I don't know. I think the sign of a true man is not that he can lead like I think a sign of a true man is that he can lead other men and shape them into men. And I think the sign of a true leader, and you see this with David, you see this with Jesus, Moses fought through this, like Joshua, like the sign of a true biblical male leader is they have other strong men around them. And And that just seems to be less and less the norm in today's culture. And I'm just very curious why that is. Like, especially because we're all leadership experts and we've all got our honorary degree, and we're all so smart and we're all doing our conferences and trying to reach dads. Like, okay, like how come so few churches have an actual succession plan? How come so few churches have even one other male who can preach regularly? How come, and then this
That isn't brought in from the outside.
that isn't brought in from the outside, and how come this stat is, you said 70% of megachurch staff are women?
Not staff, congregation.
Congregation. Oh, wow. This is
I would be
interesting.
curious. I didn't look at staff. I would be curious to see what that staff ratio is.
Yeah, bro.
Of
Well, I mean, this is great conversation, and maybe we'll pick this one back up um when with Rachel. So there'll be two part twos to this episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where we got it wrong or is incomplete. Um, and hey, let us know what you like too. Come on. So we'll bring Rachel in to talk about this, because one thing women love is when they have to speak on behalf of all women everywhere. That's real diversity and equity and inclusion. Um, and then we'll do a follow-up, where we talk about the power dynamics of unhealthy leadership, where you're being a bully, where you're drawing too much love, affection, the drug of work, accomplishment, that I think that can actually tie into some of the improper relationships, with the opposite sex for sure. Um, so yeah, thanks guys for being a part of this episode. Great conversation, Garrett.
Bye, guys. Thanks for the good convo. Don't hate us too bad in the comments. I know it's gonna be an interesting one. So, it's John's fault.